How does a writer know if prose is better for them creatively or the screenwriting format?
It's just trial and error. I wrote a screenplay in 2019, right before COVID, and I was jazzed about it, and I'm like, let's go, let's go. And I wasn't ready to show it yet, but I knew that because I knew I had rewrites to do. And then now I'm writing the novel. So the characters are intriguing me so much. I'm like, I really need to get in their heads, and and when I write, I handwrite. I'm not a typer, so I have to handwrite everything, and that's giving me so much joy right now because that's just like I'm finding out things about the theme and what I thought I was presenting, and it was just like, oh no, that's not the theme at all. So it's yeah, if something's a screenplay or a book, it could be both. It it could be just a novel, and some novels would be really hard to adapt. I think I would like to think in myself, if anyone asked me to adapt a novel that was unadaptable, I feel like I can find the thread to do it. But that's probably because I get a little delusional and I want to problem solve. So.
Hmm. So you love these characters so much that you realized that 110-page whatever screenplay wasn't enough for you creatively. You wanted
Yeah,
to tell more.
I don't know if it wasn't enough. I don't think the screenplay's there yet. So that's part of it. And I think there's a lot more to explore. And for me, the way to explore it is through prose. And I'm just doing it that way. And in the end, I mean, it might be a graphic novel. Who knows? It's almost like you don't want to put it in a ball too quick. Just let the story go. Let's see where the story goes. And who knows? Maybe it is just a book. Maybe it never was meant to be on the screen at all. Or maybe the book gets tossed away and I learn a couple things and go back in the rewrite. Um, I don't think we should. I don't think we should hold on to the medium so much that work through it and try to complete things. But we shouldn't. I don't think we need to give the medium so much power. Let's give the story the power.
Was there a defining book of your teenage years?
So I really couldn't read books in my teenage years because I grew up the Jehovah's Witness and I was reading more Bible stuff, and only slid by in the books that were assigned to us in school. So and they essentially were like, just try to read enough so you can get by and get a decent grade and get out. It was very discouraged to read anything that wasn't published by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Um, when so what happened was a friend of mine in the Jehovah's Witnesses was disfellowshipped, so he was shunned, and then he killed himself. And so I went to the elders, and I was looking for help, and because I'm like, wait, Gibby killed himself, and how can I not kill myself? Because I do have suicide in my family that's not related to the Jehovah's Witnesses, so they were completely unhelpful. They didn't want me to grieve his suicide. They just said, make sure you keep going out and preaching and stay. And that was not the answer for me. So what I did, and I think I was 22 or 23. So I went to the library instead. And I went to the psychology section and I'm like, where do I get help? So I found Tony Robbins and I found Wayne Dyer.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I was like, oh, and I would just sit there in the stacks and read these. And it kind of gave me a little bit of perspective. And then it was next to poetry. And I just started opening poetry books. And they were speaking to me. And then somehow the first novel I read was Giovanni's Room, James Baldwin. So I read that book. Kind of didn't get it because it's a homosexual love affair, if I remember right. I haven't read it since then. But I got the heart of it. It meant something to me. And I was like, who do I read next? So James Baldwin was my number one. And then I read Henry Miller. And then I found out that there was this guy, Jack Kerouac, who wrote On the Road, and it was the beat generation. I'm like, what's a beat? And I remember skateboarding to the library before it closed because I had to get a copy of On the Road that weekend and read it. And I read that, and I went, and these were touching me on emotional levels. I was having a conversation with authors that had died, but I was having a conversation that I never got to have in my life. And that's what changed everything. And then I read a book called Hunger by Knut Hamsun, this Norwegian author. And that's when I went, I'm a writer. That was the book where I just went, that's it, I'm a writer. And I'm going full in. And even if I can't eat and I have to die, I'm writing till the end. So.
And when did you tell family, people in the church that you were a writer?
Well, I was still married, and I was married. So I ended up getting married to a Jehovah's Witness, and I was still married. I told her that I'm out, and she begged me not to tell anyone, and I didn't. And that was very codependent of me, but I was also, I was also unhealthy at the time as well. But I was writing at the time, and I started a thing called Film Junkie. And I would go to film festivals. I knew all of a sudden I was a journalist in 1999. I was like, this is all you got to do. So I was going to see all these movies before they were rated, because you can't watch rated R movies in the Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I was writing about all these movies, and then they would come out and be rated R, and they'd be like, how did Tony see that? And they're like, well, it wasn't rated yet. And they'd be like, oh, okay. When I was kind of out of it. So I was actively like writing and working on my own stuff, and it was starting to get seen around, and people would get in touch with my wife at the time and be like, Tony's he wrote something that didn't seem a little too Christian, maybe you should talk to him about it. And then I would lean in harder and write a, sex scene. So, because I was being very contrarian at the time, and I think I was getting my teenage angst out when I was 27, which is just totally embarrassing. You need to get it out in your teen years, but it was a little later for me.
So then you moved to LA, and you felt like that you could be your own person, and that you didn't feel shame about writing anything?
Oh, I feel shame about writing everything. No, I didn't. The LA move didn't happen for a long time. I stayed in San Francisco. I was writing for the San Francisco Chronicle. So I was covering books and music for the Chronicle. And I wasn't planning on moving to Los Angeles. And then I finished Jesus Jerk. And then I was shopping it around. I got an agent, and then I got a publisher. And then so the book came out. And then the option thing started happening, where things go to die. But it was beautiful. I got to work with a producer who runs Hunting Lane Films, Jamie Patrickoff, and we worked on the pitch for the TV series, and I learned so much about like writing pitches, taking notes, and he was very gracious with me, and and then it was just like that kind of just fizzled out there. It was like, meh, no, screw it. And I don't think it was him. I think it was the people that he had interested in, and then. And then the book got to Eric Stoltz, and then that's when he said, "Hey, let's." First off, I found out Eric Stoltz was reading my book, and I was just like, "Well, I could just die now. We're done,"
It's pretty cool.
And then he said, "We need Tony to write the screenplay so we don't lose the voice." And I went, challenge taken. So I worked on that really hard and hours on end. And so I wasn't in LA yet. I was in San Francisco, and he's in New York. So we were doing a lot of back and forth that way. And then as it got delayed, and then shooting was supposed to start another time. It got delayed, but I knew I had to be in LA for it. And so I just got down to LA when it was in pre-production, and I sublet my apartment in San Francisco, and I just would sublet around LA while it was in pre-production. And then and some months later we were on set and on location. So that's how I came to LA. I was already very far out of the Jehovah's Witnesses. I was already divorced. I'd already created a writing life in San Francisco. And I knew it was time to leave San Francisco, but I was kind of thinking New York, because I was writing for publications and going on that angle, but the nudge to LA brought me here, which was, it turned out to be the right choice. And yeah.